Welcome to the Holding Hope podcast. My name is Pam Orr, and I am the Executive Director for Fellowship Housing, a nonprofit that empowers single moms. The Holding Hope podcast is a space for courageous single moms to share their journeys. Through their stories, we will explore the life-changing power of hope. Each of these women inspires me, and I know they will inspire you as well. I'm so glad you've decided to listen. Well, welcome to the Holding Hope podcast. I'm your host, Pam Orr, Executive Director of Fellowship Housing, and a firm believer that single moms are some of the most unsung heroes today. Today, I'll be talking with Courtney, and she is a mom of 4 who has been parenting solo now for over 10 years. I met Courtney in 2014 when she walked into the doors of Fellowship Housing, looking for a place to regroup and rebuild after her husband left their family. She's a fighter and a survivor, and today she will tell you that she believes she can conquer anything that comes her way. I'm so excited for you to hear her story. Welcome, Courtney.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, great to have you. It's safe to say, I'm going to ask you if this is true. I think it's probably safe to say that that the woman you are today is not the same woman who walked through the doors of Fellowship Housing about 10 years ago. Would you agree?
Oh, 100%.
Talk to me a little bit about that. What was happening in your life when you walked in, and who was that person that walked through the doors?
When I walked into Fellowship Housing, I was terrified, scared. I didn't know which way was up. My ex had taken one of my kids, and I didn't know where they were. I didn't know what was going on. I didn't know where I was going to be living in a matter of a few months. I was staying with my parents, but they were like, you have an October deadline. You have to figure it out. I went looking at apartments, and everybody was like, oh, it's going to be $1,600 a month. It's going to be $1,500 a month. You need at least a 3-bedroom. You need this, you need that, and I was in panic mode. I was terrified. I could barely eat. I couldn't sleep. I didn't know how to do any of this. All I could hear in my mind was my ex saying, you can't do this without me. You're going to fail. You are nothing but a loser. You're never going to amount to anything. You're just a piece of trash that nobody is ever going to want, and you're never going to amount to anything.
Oh my goodness.
So that is all I kept hearing in my mind, running over and over, and I believed every piece of that. So that's what I thought. I thought I would always be living penniless, homeless, and never be able to make it.
Yeah, I think the words that you used, you kept using the word in some of the when you gave your graduation speech at the end, but when you talked about that time, you used the words, I had no backbone. I was weak, and I was fearful, and I had no confidence. Yeah. And it sounds like those years of living with this man really undermined any confidence you have. Tell us a little bit more about that relationship and what finally came to the breaking point when it was time to step away.
When I was at the point where I was told, you can't wear that out. You can't. What are you wearing? We'd be covered from literally my chin all the way down to my feet. And he would be like, you look awful. You can't do that. Or I'd be given a time limit on how long I would be allowed to go to the store. You can't spend that much money on food. You have this much money, you have to buy this. And he would give me a specific list. Or I think the thing that finally broke in me was I was holding my daughter, and he threw me down the stairs. And that wasn't enough for him. He had taken me, threw me against the wall, and was choking me. And my oldest son, who was 9 at the time, took a frying pan and hit him on the head, and he took my son and threw him against the wall. And that night he decided to lock us in a room, took my phone. We had no way to get out of the room. We had no food, no way to get out. And then I was like, why am I living like this? And I finally got up the next morning. I called his mom and I said, either you come and get your son or he's going to jail. And so she came and was like, okay, and got her son. And I called my mom because I called my mom and I was like, I'm done. I can't do this. And he had ended up taking everything out of our account, left negative $200 in our account, then shut off my phone. So that I knew it was time. It was done. I thought maybe I would take him back after that, but that was fine. That was the final straw.
It's a breaking point.
That was my breaking point.
Now, to be clear, not only did he leave with everything financially that you had, any money, your phone, took everything, but he also, if I'm remembering correctly, took your son as well.
So yeah, he ended up taking my son and disappearing. And he probably would have taken the other two, but he did not know where they were at that time.
What does that do in the heart of a mom when one of her children is ripped away from her?
It's terrifying. It's heartbreaking. But at the same time, I had 3 other children that I still had to take care of and provide for. So I still had to get up every day and pretend like nothing was wrong for them. I still had to figure out how to pay bills. I had to figure out how to get a car because the car was gone. I still had to figure out how to function. I was in the middle of Wisconsin, so there was no family. I had no means of support. My landlord, I got really lucky with my landlord. He let us live there the rest of the year so the kids could at least finish school. I got very, very lucky breaks along the way. My car got hit by a plow like right before my ex had left. And so that insurance money came in after he left. So I was able to pay bills and live off of that. And that's what actually paid for how I was able to afford to pay the down payment for fellowship housing and pay that first month's rent and security deposit. It was almost like it was meant to be. Fellowship was meant to be. And otherwise there's no other way to explain it.
Yeah. Before we get to that season of life, the fellowship housing season, I think it's easy for us looking from the outside in to go, why did you stay so long? Why didn't you leave sooner? What would lead you to stay? Instead of recognizing the courage that it took to say, I'm going to start a different life. Talk to me a little bit about what that actually meant. I mean, you said already you had no money. He was gone with one of your children. You had no family in the area. How do you take that leap of faith?
I feel like it was almost, I had no choice. Yeah. I mean, you get to the point where it's sink or swim. And I looked at my kids and it was, okay, time to swim. And so that's what I decided to do. I knew I had no choice. I had to swim for them. So that's what I did.
What do you think would have happened had you stayed?
I would not be alive sitting here today.
Yeah. Wow.
I mean, if you put it blank.
Yep.
Point blank.
Point blank. Yeah. Put it bluntly. There you go.
Yeah. Bluntly. That's
right.
the word.
Yeah. Okay. So, he's taken your confidence. He's beaten you down physically and emotionally. And I think you said when you walked through the doors that your goal was just to survive.
Mm-hmm.
So talk to me about walking in the doors and so fellowship housing is a place for single moms to come and find a safe space, live for 2 years, and work on the financial piece of things, but also work on healing and finding strength and building that confidence again. So you walked through the door. It was terrifying.
That's an understatement.
And then, so I wanted to talk about that season, because I think what's so unique is you would not describe yourself in those words today. You would not say, I have no backbone, I'm weak, I'm fearful, I have no confidence. How would you describe yourself today?
I would say I'm a survivor. I'm a fighter. I'm very opinionated now, and I'm not afraid to share my opinion with anybody. I'm very outspoken now, which I never would have thought of myself as outspoken ever before. I would have kept my thoughts to myself.
Sure.
Now I'm not afraid, and I don't care who doesn't agree with me. You'll either listen or you won't. But in the past, that never would have even crossed my mind to have an opinion. So I'm just complete opposite. It's funny because I teach, and when I first started teaching, I was very timid and shy, even when I was teaching. And I had an observation a couple weeks ago, and the superintendent was watching me teach, and she even was like, "You're very confident and very comfortable." And those are never words that were ever used to describe me when I was a teacher, when I was like first starting teaching. And it was about the same time that I was with my ex and was teaching. And those were never words on my evaluations. And now my evaluations say confident, knows her material, knows her, like, is comfortable in front of the classroom. Like, that's never words that were on my evaluations. It's like two different people they were evaluating. And it boggles my mind that the difference in evaluations, even as a teacher, from where I was when I was with him and even right after to where I am now with everything I've learned and what I've went through.
I am so interested in knowing what took place from that time when you walked in the door, beaten down. And let's remember, for those that are watching this, I mean, we're seeing a picture of her kids, but they were not taller than you when you walked in the doors of Fellowship Housing.
No, they were not.
I have a very clear recollection of these 4 small children, ages when you started with us, they were little. They were like,
I want to say
3, 5.
I think they were 4 or 5. They were little. 4
Little.
or 5. Xander wasn't with us, and 10.
Yeah.
They were little.
They were very little.
Very little.
So, and I remember, and we joke around a little bit around the office that when Courtney would come in, and with these 3 little whirling dervishes, I mean, they were all
Tasmanian devils.
Tasmanian devils is a good picture. It was very clear from our outside observation that life was a bit chaotic at the time. So let's talk about, because I'm guessing there are some that are listening that are in that chaotic season of life that are wondering, is it ever going to be any different? Am I ever going to have hope that it's going to be different? And I'd love for them to hear how you got from point A to point B, where you are today. So let me just be quiet and listen to you share a little bit of that story.
So I ended up getting Xander back, I want to say 6 months into 6 months into my stay with Fellowship Housing. So I ended up with having all 4. I was the first mom with 4 in Fellowship Housing.
We didn't accept moms with 4
They did
before,
not.
But you were the first. You broke the...
during my divorce, I ended up getting custody, and I was able to get it approved, which thankfully, and my landlord, David, was amazing, and he agreed to it. So they would literally be going 4 different directions at any given time, and I would literally sit down and cry in defeat multiple times everywhere. I'd be in a store, and I finally got to the point where I ended up in counseling, and I had amazing counselors at Fellowship Housing, and advocates at fellowship that would help me and worked with me and would help me wrangle my children on numerous occasions. And we would do Wednesday night dinners. And they would give me a break, and they would sit with my kids so I could just sit and breathe. And honestly, those little respites made a huge impact on me. And I know that's might not mean a lot to many, but to me, it was a game changer. Having that little bit of respite on those Wednesday night dinners meant the world to me, because it gave me a mental break that I needed so I could just regroup my thoughts. And then I was able to have the ability to then regroup and able to just deal with my kids and redirect their behaviors. I was then able to take that and go and use that when I would go shopping. If they ran away from me, even if I had a full cart of stuff, we would leave. I would just be like, we're done. And we would get in the car and we'd go home, whether we had the groceries or not. If we had to sit in the parking lot when they had meltdowns, we sat in the parking lot for a half hour, 45 minutes. And I had people who would sit there and stare at me for hours. And I was like, well, it is what it is.
Sure.
I also found out after I had left the fellowship housing program, my 13-year-old, my youngest boy, I found out he was diagnosed with defiant mood destructive disorder. So I found he also is hard of hearing. So that played into a lot of his behavior. He needs a lot of high structure. So me actually starting to just leave stores and sticking through with punishments, like, and follow through. It was a lot of work. And I had to do it every single time. If I gave a direction and I said, we're going to do X, Y, and Z, then I had to do X, Y, and Z. If I had a bedtime routine, we had to do the bedtime routine every single time. And I had to be very structured and very routined in my life. And for him, without even realizing it, I was already doing what he needed. He ended up being hospitalized 4 different times. But he ended up being in self-contained classrooms from the time he was in kindergarten, which started while I was still in fellowship. And he was on 16 pills a day, every day. He is now out of self-contained program. He is not on any medication. And I mean, it took a lot of me and a team of people working very closely, very tightly, but every day for years. And he is thriving and doing really well. His behavior is completely under control. I haven't seen him smile probably since he was probably about 6 was probably the last time I seen that kid smile. So he's come a long way. So
my goodness,
it took a lot.
So that consistency and that standing by your word and following through on consequences, super easy to say. I have 4 kids. Now mine are all grown. But that's hard when you're co-parenting. Now, imagine doing that when you're parenting solo, you work full time. So you come home and you're tired. And then to do that on a consistent basis, you're a fighter.
I learned how to do it though, because fellowship puts rules in place, and you had to follow the rules, and you had to be consistent, and had I not had the rules of fellowship in place and be consistent, and you guys were consistent with the rules and what we were supposed to do and the expectations were in place, I didn't have that. I didn't know how to do that. But because I learned how to do that from fellowship, I was able to take that and do it with my kids.
Interesting.
And I know that sounds funny and it might sound strange, but because of fellowship, I learned how to be consistent and learn to follow like the rules. I was able then to apply it with my kids.
Well, that's wonderful. So you've been a fighter since quite young, right?
Mhm.
You really shouldn't be here today.
No.
Tell us about that.
So when I was a baby, about 18 months, I had a really high fever of like 104.8, 104.9, somewhere around there. And I was in a coma. And my parents were told I probably would not survive. And I was at the coma I told they was probably not going to come out of. And I kind of shocked everybody.
And you made it.
I made it.
And here you are.
And here I am. And it's not even the last time.
Right. And then you got cancer.
I had cancer.
When you were 5 months pregnant with your oldest?
I with my youngest. I was diagnosed with uterine cancer when I was pregnant with Savannah. I went in. I wasn't feeling well. I didn't actually know I was pregnant with her. I went in for an ultrasound, and because I had like symptoms, but didn't have a clue I was pregnant. And so they did an ultrasound, and they were like, "Oh, hold on." And they ran out of the room, and I was like, "That's never a good sign."
Right.
And they come back in with a doctor and a couple other people, and they're like, "Well, you're pregnant, but we also think you have cancer." And they're like, I was like, "Is it a boy?" And they're
Because
like,
you have 3 boys already.
Yeah. And they're like, "No, it's a girl." I was like, "Well, no, that can't be. Change it to a girl." I was like, "It can't be a girl. You have to change it to a boy." I was like, "I don't want a girl." And they're like, "Did you hear what we said about the cancer?" And I was like, "Yeah, but you said it's a girl, so change it to a boy." And they're like, "Did you hear what we said about the cancer?" And I was like, "Yes, but you also said it's a girl, so change it." And they're like, "You're focusing on the wrong thing." So I was like, but they only gave me like a 5% survival rate of survival. And they told me I also had to get an abortion. And I was like, "Yeah, that's not happening." I was like, "Fix it. Just figure it out." And I was literally like, "You're not listening to us very well." And I was like, "You'll figure it out." I was like, "It'll all work out." And they're like, "You have to get an abortion." And I was like, "And you have to figure out how to fix it without getting an abortion.
Right.
And you have to change it to a boy." And they're like,
well, 1 out of 2 isn't bad.
So,
right?
Yeah.
So you did not have any treatment for the cancer until after she was born.
Her. Yeah.
And then it was a fight.
And it wasn't even a fight, really. I'm stubborn. And they gave me they were like I just ended up doing a hysterectomy, and that was at pretty much the end of my marriage, because my ex is like, "If you do that, then you can't have kids." And that was pretty much how our marriage fell apart, was because he wanted more kids. And I was like, "Well, if I go through treatments, then I'm going to die." I did a couple rounds of chemo. And then they did the hysterectomy, and it was gone. The ultrasounds are really cool because you could see her and the cancer growing at the same time. It was really cool.
I don't know how many people would say, looking at that picture, that it was really cool.
It was so cool.
You have a tenacious fighter spirit in you, for sure.
Well, what are you going to do? It's either laugh or cry. And it was, it was really cool. It was the size of like a grapefruit. So it was like 5 pounds. Wow. She was 713 and the cancer was 5 pounds. So,
unbelievable.
It was fun.
It was fun.
It was fun to watch grow.
So you've fought at many places in your life, and feels like you came to a breaking point when your husband left. Was there ever a time when you just lost all hope, when you thought this is not going to turn around?
Probably when my ex left. I honestly didn't, even when I was walking into fellowship, I honestly didn't think. I was like, okay, this is like a means. I'm just going to get a little bit of money into a savings. This will just help me get to the point where at least maybe then I can afford a house or figure out how. I honestly didn't think I would get very much further than where I was, but I thought, okay, if I can get like 5,000 into a savings or 500 into my savings account, that'll be huge. If I can just get enough for a down payment for an apartment, or like that I didn't have high expectations. I really did not think I could do any better than like maybe 1 month's worth of savings. Like I had very, very low expectations going in.
So let's talk about that, because when you become a part of the Fellowship Housing family, and for every mom that does, we ask you to write, what are some goals for yourself. And I actually printed out your goals. These are the handwritten goals that you wrote. And I want to read a few of them because I want you then to tell me what you actually did accomplish over the 2 years. So your housing goal was you wanted to have a place where you didn't have to share a bedroom with your kids. So I'm assuming at your parents' house, you were sharing a bedroom with your kids. You did say, I want to own my own home. So that was also a housing goal. You wanted some extra job security. You wanted to grow with the school district that you were at. You wanted some extra to move up on the pay scale a bit. Your debt repayment goal. So you came in with about $5,000 and you wanted to be debt free. And you said in 5 years. Savings goal is you wanted to have at least $2,000 in an emergency fund. And I'd like to have $2,000 in a savings account. Let's stop there. So after 2 years, where was your housing? Where did you end up with housing?
I ended up buying my own house.
You ended up purchasing your own house.
I did.
Incredible.
And it's 3 bedrooms with a loft that I've turned the loft into, each of the boys share a loft that I've kind of turned into 2 bedrooms with furniture. And then, so each of us have their own rooms.
You have your own room.
I do have my own room.
That's fantastic.
And there's 2 bathrooms. Wonderful. And we have a dog.
And you have a dog. Your debt repayment. So you came in, like I said, with about $5,000 in debt. You wanted to pay it off in 5 years. How long did it take you to be debt free?
6 months.
6 months you were debt free. It's unbelievable. And the savings goal, which is my favorite. I want to have $2,000. So a total of $4,000 is what you were hoping to have. When you graduated, how much money did you have in savings?
Oh, I don't remember exactly, but it was probably closer to, I want to say
$28,000.
Yeah, it was insane. It was high. Yeah. It was like, at least I knew it was over half a year's worth of income.
Yes, you had quite a safety net, some savings and all of that, which came in handy because you had some illnesses with your children that required you to just give them some extra space and time.
I ended up doubling that within like the first 2 years.
Really? You doubled the savings within the first 2 years. That's amazing. So I'm guessing those listening are going, how did you do that? Like, how did you do that? How did you get from these goals that are lowball goals,
which I thought were impossible to reach.
Which you thought were impossible goals, and you blew by them. How did that happen?
Budgeting. I learned how to budget.
Novel.
Yeah. Who would have thought? Right. And ironically, I have actually taught other people how to budget and gotten a lot of my coworkers out of debt throughout the last 7 years. I have taught several people how to do it.
Well, your story is compelling. And so when you tell your story and someone hears that, how did you do that? That's what an opportunity for you to pay it forward.
I love being able to do it.
Others' lives.
It's become like a hobby. I find it as a challenge because everyone's like, I can't do that. Give me your income and give me your budget.
And we're going to
figure it out. And so it becomes a challenge. It's almost become a game for me.
Well, and you've accomplished all of this. You didn't suddenly have a job that paid, 6 figures. You did this on your teacher's salary with discipline around budgeting, paying off debt faithfully. I assume you used our debt retirement program, which matched some of the debt payments to help you move that forward. But the results are simply incredible. Simply incredible. Tell me a little bit about what life is like for you today. What's going on in your life today? Because here's what I want to be clear that we say. You're still parenting solo, correct? And I'm guessing that while you have made incredible strides and you would never describe yourself now as no backbone, as weak, as scared. I think the words were, I think I can tackle just about anything that comes my way. It's an
Mhm.
amazing confidence. Um, but you're still a single mom, and that
Mhm.
still brings challenges. And I'm guessing that life isn't all roses and sunshine all
No,
the time. How are you doing right now?
I still have day-to-day challenges just like every other, even married couples.
Sure.
Being married, single, everybody has them. Um, my daughter was diagnosed with seizures during COVID, and during COVID, it was easy because I was home, but she was if during COVID, she was missing a lot of school. She was tired all the time, she was sleeping most of the time, but it wasn't noticeable because I was able to be home. But 2 years ago, she I had to take off of work to be home with her. She had missed something like 66 days, and that's just full days. That's not even counting the days I had to go pick her up.
Mm.
My son was still struggling. I had to pick him up still because he was still missing pretty regularly because the transition back from COVID back to school full time was just too much for him. So he was missing school. So between the two of them, there's no way I could maintain a job at that time. So luckily, having savings in my account, I was able to stay home and just live off of my savings. And then last year, she probably missed she missed 77 days last year. So again, working was not an option. This year she has become seizure free as of last year. So she's coming up on 18 months in December. However, we were able to arrange her daily schedule, so she goes in later, so she has less periods, so she's only going to school for 5 periods a day, so she hasn't missed any days, so it's easier for me to work, so I'm back at work this year. But that's, like, a whole different challenge for a single parent, but because I have that financial security of having savings in the account, like, it being able to have been taught how to budget, I was able to budget out that knowing I was gonna be home with her for at least 2 years. So I had figured out exactly how much I would need, and I figured that all out and budgeted it and was able to make that happen for her and made her feel safe. So that's just one of the challenges that comes up as a parent that you have to be able to figure out. So that's just one thing I faced with her.
My goodness.
And then I've got my 15-year-old who's a whole nother challenge, but he's in a whole different bracket, like trying to figure out he wants to take every single AP and dual credit, like just like every other kid out there. They just like to make you stay on your toes. But I've got the behaviors under control, so at least that's
Well, that's wonderful. That's
so
huge strides.
yeah.
Well, and the thing, I think with having 4 kids is each one of them is so
So
incredibly, like, when the second or third one came out, I thought, "Okay, this next one, I've got this, I've got." No, they're
no,
entirely different. It's just not fair.
it's not.
Why can't one
You
of them be
finally
similar?
you finally think you got this, and
I
then
know,
it's like
turn. Right. And then, if you don't mind, tell me about, you had an addition to your family. And I know this is a hard subject, but would you mind sharing about your new grandbaby?
So my oldest is a handful.
Mhm.
He graduated, it'll almost be 2 years. He barely made it out of high school. He is a challenge all of himself. Got mixed into a little bit of drugs.
Mm.
He ended up he worked for a company and he had like a switchblade that is technically illegal if you're under 18. So they were going to suspend him. They were going to expel him. They decided to just put him into like a behavior program and just let him finish early. And he graduated, met a girl, got pregnant, got into like some other trouble. Him and her are like oil and water. They don't mix
Mm.
well, but they can't stay apart. They ended up getting pregnant and had a little baby girl. The baby's mom almost died. the baby was in the NICU for a while. They had the baby during like the tail end of COVID. Couldn't go into the hospital, couldn't see the baby. They lived with us for a while. Then they lived with her mom and dad, her stepmom and dad for a while. They got kicked out of there. They were living with me. And then all of a sudden they just disappeared out of the face of the earth. And they just told everybody, we don't want anybody to do anything to do with anybody. And we'll see you when we see you. Because they decided they did not like my rules, which were you have to have a job and you have to pay $500 a month. And I was keeping the $500 a month in an envelope, well, in the bank. And when they moved out, I was going to give it to them so they could have like a down payment for their own place.
Wonderful.
I did not tell them that, but that's what it was going to be intended for. And they didn't like those rules. So they all of a sudden just one day up and left. And the last that we knew, they're in Missouri, but we don't even know that for sure. They have cut contact with all their friends, all the family, her family, my family. I get random texts, random pictures, but that's about it.
That is hard, Courtney.
It is.
One of the most challenging things, and we talked about this earlier, about being a mom or a parent, is you raise your children to make their own choices. And by golly, when they make their own choices, that's sometimes really, really hard, isn't it?
It's probably the hardest thing. And I talk to my mom about this all the time. It's like, you have to, you raise them to make their own choices, and you want them to make their own choices, and you nurture and you teach them. And then at the same time, but then you watch them and you're like, you're making the wrong choice. Don't make that choice.
Right.
But it's like, it's like watching a train wreck, and you can see the two trains are going to crash, but you can't stop it. And it's like, you know the outcome because you live the outcome. And I'm like, I know what is going to happen to you. I know it because I've lived that. You watched me live that. Please learn my lessons.
Yeah, right.
And you can't live their life for them. It's like, I know I made that mistake. I know what mistake you're going to make, but I have to let you make it.
Absolutely. It's when we start praying a lot more.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
And you cry and you cry and you pick yourself up because you have 3 more kids.
You have 3 other kids to take care of. Yeah. I have 2 questions in closing for you. Well, a question that I want to read something and ask you one final question. The first one is, what do you want people out there to know and understand about being a single mom?
It's not the easiest thing, but it's got its rewards. There are so many rewards. You get double the kisses, you get double the love, you get all the benefits. I don't know. Your kids are always going to need you. Even if they don't always know it,
Right.
They will need you.
Right.
But even on the roughest day, it's still rewarding.
It's great.
And it's great. You can do it.
Well, and here's the one thing you wrote, and let me pull it here. In getting ready for the podcast, I asked you to answer a few questions, and you wrote this: watching these kiddos go from kiddos who did not follow directions or expectations to kiddos who know how to follow expectations, are thriving, joining the sports that they love, doing well in school, having dreams that I never thought possible. I really never thought that this life was a possibility in 2014. I thought I would never survive. Now I have so much hope for myself and my kiddos, and I see possibilities I never, ever thought possible for them or would have dreamed of. That's bringing you tears, isn't it? Yeah.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. That's an incredible statement. So if we could put a group of single moms, or if there are any single moms listening today who are in that dark spot that you were in 2014, what would you tell them?
Even if your darkest hour, there is always hope. Their kids will surprise you. Sorry.
You're okay. Take your time.
I mean, every day, there's just more and more amazing things that they just surprise me with. Like my 15-year-old, I never, ever would have thought he would ever want to join the Army National Guard. Like, hello, like, who would have thought? Even though my oldest drives me crazy and has disappeared, he always told me I'm never having kids. And he actually is a really good dad. Like, I never, ever would have dreamed of him being a dad. And he's really good at it. Like, he would get up and change her diaper and feed her and change her. And he's so overly protective of her. Like, he would never let any harm come to her intentionally. Like, he would give his life for her. I never would have thought that.
That's pretty special to see your child being a parent.
Yes.
Yeah.
Wesley has, even through his behaviors, he has empathy for others and other people see it. Like, I always worried that other people wouldn't see it. I saw it, but I never thought other people did until people started telling me, because all I thought people saw of him was these behaviors and this kid that always misbehaved because he would run out of school. He would get in trouble. He would just do all these behavior and behavior and behavior and behavior. And so that's all I thought people saw. But the empathy in that kid, like,
it's beautiful.
Yeah. And the fact that he wants to train dogs. Like, he wants to be an officer training, like a police dog trainer. And my daughter, like, she just, even with her seizures, she never, ever lets them slow her down. Like, they keep telling her what she can't do. And she's like, watch me.
Sounds like somebody else we know.
Right?
As what I think about when I think of single moms who may be listening, and I'm listening to your story, and you had that dark, dark season in 2014. You may have been at a place where hope was really thin, but you never gave up. There was always hope of a better tomorrow. And I think that's what I hear from your story is do not give up, keep fighting.
Yeah.
And you just don't know what tomorrow is going to bring. And look at where you're at now.
I still picture them running around.
I do picture them too, running around. Yeah, Took a lot of energy. Well, Courtney, thank you for sharing your beautiful story and your beautiful journey. I look forward to connecting with you in the future and just hearing how this continues to unfold for you. You are courageous. You are tenacious. You are a fighter. And you're a great mom. Thanks for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for tuning into the Holding Hope podcast today. If you enjoyed this discussion and found value in it, you can follow and subscribe to our podcast on YouTube, Apple, or Spotify. And maybe more importantly, if you know someone who would benefit from today's conversation, please share this episode with them. Word of mouth is a powerful way to connect those who may be lonely or apart or losing hope, to pull them into a community. So please offer that invitation. And if you'd like to learn more about fellowship housing, you may go to fhcmoms.org to learn more. Thank you again for joining us today.